The air is heavy and sweet, the ground a quilt of moss and peat. Between towering trunks, wings whisper like paper fans, cutting lanes through humid light. There are no bird songs here, no mammal calls, only the clatter of leaves and the quick chime of chitin against chitin. A still pool shivers, and a shadow crosses it like a thrown spear. The sky itself feels alive, filled with glossy bodies and glass bright eyes that catch every movement. This is deep time, far before the first hawk ever rode a thermal, long before bats and swallows learned the grammar of flight. In this ancient theatre, insects have written the first aerial script, and they perform it with calm precision and sudden force. To move through these swamps is to accept terms set by the air, where the next breath smells of resin, and the next step may bring wings. The shock is not that insects fly, but that some are large enough to cast real shade, large enough to patrol the canopy like drifting hunters. The question rises naturally, as steady as mist from warm water. How did insects grow so large, and why did that grandeur end? The answer belongs to a landscape of cold, dark roots and club-shaped trees, to an atmosphere richer than ours, and to a world that briefly allowed the small to become enormous, and to turn the sky into a hunting ground. The world that lifted those wings is a continent of swamps and shallow rivers, a green maze without winter. Club moss forests lean into the damp, horsetails tower like living scaffolds, and broad ferns ladder sunlight down to the muck. The ground breathes through peat beds that will one day harden into coal, while slow streams braid over beds of silt and leaf litter. Air presses softly on the skin, warm and heavy, laced with more oxygen than modern lungs expect. Fires spark easily in this charged air, and storms carry the scent of ash as often as rain. Along the margins of pools, great amphibians rest with broad heads propped on roots, their skin shining like wet bark. On the drier tongues of land, early reptiles move with a careful economy, hugging warmth and shadow in equal measure. But above the waterline, above the tangle of roots, there is a second landscape, layered and quick. In that layered air, insects own the distances between trees and the light wells punched through the canopy. Clouds of delicate flyers drift like pollen made of muscle, while heavier forms cruise the alleyways of leaves with deliberate strokes. This is a three-tiered world, floor and understory and sky, and each tier connects through a weave of hunger and escape. It is an ecosystem without birds and without bats, and in that vacancy, wings with many joints have taken possession. Speed belongs to them, and silence, an ambush in midair. The giants of this sky are not myths, they are measure and fossil and wing print. Picture a dragonfly shape expanded to improbable scale, a span as broad as a hawk's, with veins like stained glass leading strength into every panel. The hunting pose is simple and ancient, legs set forward like a hoop, bristled with spines that turn space into a net. A smaller flyer slips into that hoop, and the net closes, and momentum does the rest. Over shaded pools, the giants pause, turning on an axis of eyes, then tilt and fall like a thrown blade, snatching what dares to rise. In the glow where treetops break, they station themselves as gatekeepers, patrolling corridors in slow loops until the next chance appears. Below them, the ground holds its own titans of jointed armor. Millipede relatives as long as a doorframe ripple across the leaf bed, and broad-bodied roaches move like living shields under fallen trunks. The effect is total, a sensation that every surface is watched by something with plates and hinges and patience. To a small amphibian, the sky is not empty, it is filled with outlines that resolve into danger. To a juvenile reptile testing its legs, the safest place is still a hazard if a shadow turns and drops. The giants rule by presence more than pursuit, and the air itself seems loyal to them, denser, more obedient to their wing beats. This is not fantasy, it is anatomy expressed at scale, a clean machine built from tubes and membranes tuned to rule the distances between leaves. How did such scale become possible? The answer begins with breathing, and with the way insects move air through their bodies. Instead of lungs, they wear a map of tubes inside, a tracheal forest that branches into every cell. In our era, that system limits size because oxygen must diffuse along these paths quickly enough to feed muscle. But in an atmosphere swollen with oxygen, diffusion runs faster and the ceiling lifts. More oxygen dissolves into each breath, and the tubes feed larger tissues without starving the core. The air itself helps in other ways. Warm, humid, and dense, it gives lift generously, letting wings bite and hold with less speed. Above the canopy, there are no vertebrate flyers to contest the lanes. No bat unrolls leather, no bird folds feathers along a keel. A clear niche invites expansion, and evolution answers by lengthening spans and thickening veins. Below the canopy, prey is plentiful, layered from surface skimmers to mid-story commuters, a living buffet that rewards patience and reach. Each factor is modest alone, but together they tilt the table decisively. The fossil ledger supports this story. Wing impressions shine in fine mudstones, large and clean enough to show every beam and crossbar. Trackways score soft banks with tidy rows of tarsal pads. In modern rooms, experiments raise insects in oxygen-rich air and measure growth responses, not as perfect analogues, but as hints. The pattern is consistent. When the air changes, bodies follow, and when opportunity opens, wings widen to meet it. The reign of the giants ends as quietly as a tide, turning, then gathers speed. Swamps shrink as climates shift, and the green maze dries into a patchwork of woods and open flats. Rivers wander differently, peat beds retreat, and the grand factories of damp that once bled oxygen into the sky lose ground. The atmosphere leans back toward a leaner mix, and the tracheal system feels the change first. What was easy becomes costly. What was effortless lift becomes a harder bargain with air. Fire still runs, but in new patterns, and forests reset in mosaics that do not favor the largest flyers. Competition arrives from directions the giants never needed to consider. On the ground, new predators with better sprint and bite claim edges once safe. In the air, the future loads its bow. It will be a long time before vertebrate wings appear, but when they do, the sky will host a different conversation about power and grace. Insects do not vanish, they revise. The rule of large forms gives way to a culture of speed and maneuver, tight turns in thin air, quick accelerations from rest, and an economy that spends less to gain more. Selection trims spans and slims bodies, refining 1,000 small tricks. Eyes grow larger relative to head, wings acquire new folds and hinges, and thoraxes concentrate power into compact engines. In the rocks, the record narrows, then diversifies again, a reminder that decline in one dimension often hides a bloom in another. The legacy endures wherever a modern dragonfly patrols a pond at evening. In that steady hover, in that effortless pivot, the old design shines unblurred by time. Even scaled down, the machine is perfect for its work, a marriage of sight and speed and instantaneous control. The giants are gone, but the blueprint persists, trusted and retuned for thinner air. The lesson is larger than wings. Atmosphere shapes possibility. When oxygen swells, new sizes become feasible, and when it recedes, new strategies take the stage. Life treats air not as emptiness but as medium, a material with rules that invite certain solutions and forbid others. Imagine walking the old swamps, feeling the press of rich air in your lungs, watching corridors full of jointed hunters pace their routes above your head. Imagine hearing not birdsong but the faint ticking of wing veins and the soft crackle of leaf litter as armored bodies pass. The sky was a road then, owned by many feet and many eyes, and it carried teeth of a different kind. To tell that story is to widen what we mean by danger and by wonder, and to understand that dominance can belong to forms we no longer expect. If these deep time journeys stir you, stay with them. Share the questions that follow you out of the forest, and keep looking upward when the light turns green and the air grows still. The first empire of flight belongs to insects, and its echoes still draw circles over water at dusk.